Ooh, so this is such a good question. For people who don't remember, Gloss and Kashmir are the two siblings from District 1 who won back-to-back games when Katniss was a kid. Based on movie promo material, which I think is pretty trustworthy for this, he won the 63rd games and she won the 64th. And while we don't know that much about them, I do think there are some tea leaves we can read, including a clear strategy from them and the reason why the Capitol was never going to allow them to be the last two remaining in the first place. Hi, I'm Elle. Welcome to my channel. I make content about the Hunger Games, Percy Jackson, Song of Ice and Fire, that kind of thing. If you followed me over here from TikTok, welcome back, and if you're just discovering me here, also welcome. Either way, if you want to see more of my content, please hit the subscribe and like buttons. They really help out my channel as I try to continue to grow on here as well. So I think Gloss and Kashmir's play from the start was to get to the end with the two of them, knowing that their popularity in the Capitol and the way they'd presented themselves during the interview specifically could push the Capitol into following the precedent it had just set the year before in allowing the victors from the same district to both go home if they were the last ones remaining. And I also think that that strategy is exactly why they were both sent in the first place. Because while they almost certainly volunteered for their first games, I don't see any reason to think that either of them did for their second games, for that third quarter quell. I found that a decent number of people had canon that Gloss volunteered after his sister was chosen to help keep her safe, but I think Katniss would have mentioned if that was the case, because of the parallels both with her volunteering for Prim the year before, and her going into the arena wanting to save Peeta for that year for the 75th games. And it also would have been a reminder for what situation she would have been in if Prim had been a little brother rather than a little sister, because Gloss would not have been able to volunteer for his sister. That's kind of the point. And it also doesn't make sense to me because having a loved one going in with you can actually be a pretty significant liability. Kashmir is the only one of the three people in her alliance who was not able to defend herself against a melee attack after her brother went down to Katniss's arrow. Maybe that was a coincidence, I'm oversimplifying it a little, but the implication to me seems to be that she may have been distracted because this wasn't just an ally that had gotten an arrow in his head, this was her brother. Him being in there also meant that she had to worry more about her loved ones back in District 1 than if she'd gone into the arena confident that her brother would continue to take care of them whatever happened to her. Like, people can have their headcanons. Headcanons are fun. This is just why I personally don't subscribe to that one at all. I think Kashmir was actually probably specifically targeted for the 75th games. I don't really buy into the idea that it's rigged all the time, but I think most of us agree that the Capitol rigged at least some of the draws for the 75th games. I don't think anyone thinks they were all chosen randomly. It's heavily implied in the books and outright said in the movies that the entire premise, the victors going back into the arena, was not supposed to be the third quarter quell at all. They just wanted to get rid of victors. But the thing is, it's implied in Mockingjay that Kashmir was a bit of a troublemaker. Haymitch tells them that Snow had his family unalived for the way he won the games, but kept Haymitch alive to be the person to hold up to the young Finnicks and Joannas and Kashmirs of what could happen to a victor who caused problems. Kashmir being grouped in with those two specifically, who we know were actively part of the rebellion and we know have a lot of resentment toward the Capitol, implies to me that she was seen as someone who was not necessarily under the Capitol's thumb in the way they would have wanted. Threats clearly weren't effective at keeping Finnick and Joanna in line long term, and this is pure speculation, but I do think that her brother being a victor probably added some complications that the Capitol was just as happy to get rid of. And while Kashmir and Gloss did have their alliance with District 2, who seemed to be less overtly rebellious at the idea of being sent in, Brutus even volunteers, although we don't know why, the way Gloss and Kashmir act is a lot closer to District 4 than District 2 leading up to them going into the arena. This is an alliance of convenience based on a long history of 1, 2, and 4 being allies in the games. And as far as we know, Gloss, Kashmir, Katniss, and Peeta all think that this is operating like any other games. They don't know about the Mockingjay plot. But even the little bit we see from Gloss and Kashmir is challenging the Capitol's authority in a pretty direct way. Them couching it in flowery language doesn't change that. And while District 1 isn't like one of the first districts to rebel, Kashmir and Gloss do establish a distinctly rebellious tone in the interviews, and they were the ones to do that. Katniss has had some friction with them. She kind of chalks it up to her unaliving both District 1 tributes the year before, who Kashmir and Gloss may have even been mentors for. But she does recognize that that's what they're doing when they start talking about how much they appreciate the Capitol and feel like the Capitol is their family, and how sad they are for people in the Capitol that they'll lose so many of their beloved victors. Imagine if the first 4 tributes had all just kind of treated this as business as usual, and it wasn't until District 3 that people started pushing back. That would have had a very different tone than Brutus and Enibaria being the odd two out. And this is where I think part of the play was. Kashmir and Gloss were smart. They knew how to multitask as they played the capital, their victors. They knew that what they were saying was likely to lead to an outcry against the games, but they also knew that presenting themselves in that way made it much more likely that the game makers would have faced pressure to allow them both to live if they'd been the last two to make it to the end. Because these are two victors who just have such a special bond with the capital. They're volunteers, they really value the games and understand. How could the game makers make these two siblings turn on each other? They changed the rules just last year, and that was just for two kids from District 12 who happened to be in love, not for siblings who have such a strong relationship with the capital. Obviously, the only right answer would be to allow both of them to go home. I don't know that that would have been successful, but I think that was their play as soon as they were both chosen. Because people from the career districts are just people. They're not bloodthirsty monsters just because they're able to put on a mask of being willing to do whatever it takes in a way that's not actually that dissimilar to Katniss herself. We just know better because we're in her head. They care about their families just as much as people everywhere else. And in the interviews, he's the one who seems to be talking about the kindness that the capital has shown him and his sister specifically. Kashmir is kind of referring to all of the victors. Now, obviously, the whole thankful to the capital thing is bullshit, but Gloss is the one who's using his interview specifically to prop up his sister as well as himself, because there's a third play in that. Even if he goes down, what he said about his sister is going to remain in people's heads. So I don't think they would have just turned on each other, but I also think the capital was never going to let it get to that point, just like they were never going to allow Katniss and Peeta to be the two to survive to the end.